The helicopter skimmed through the spotless sky, its blades carving bright circles into the morning over a sea so blue it looked unreal. Beneath them, the Mediterranean shimmered like stained glass, each wave catching the golden sun and throwing it back in tiny sparks. As they descended, Monaco slowly revealed itself, a narrow strip of glitter wedged between abrupt green hills and the endless water. White yachts lounged in the harbor like oversized jewels, and roofs the color of burnt clay twisted along streets lined with palm trees so straight they looked drawn with a ruler. Diana pressed her forehead lightly to the helicopter window, hair shivering in the propeller's breeze. Oh, she breathed, not even realizing the sound had slipped out. Opposite her, Dodi barely glanced at the view. He watched her instead, the reflection of the city dancing over her eyes. For him, the real miracle was not the tiny principality beneath them, but the impossible fact that she was here, beside him, woven into his story as if it had always been meant that way. There was something in the air, maybe the sharp taste of salt, maybe the way the morning seemed to hold its own breath, that told him this arrival was not just another trip. It felt like crossing an invisible border into a world that belonged only to them. The helicopter settled onto the hotel's private helipad with a soft, final thud. The blade slowed, the noise faded, and at once a small, elegant team appeared, moving with respectful efficiency. No one stared, no one fussed. It was as if they were used to handling miracles. They were led through a hidden entrance, into a glass elevator that rose so smoothly it felt like floating. When the doors opened at the top floor, the suite waiting for them was all light and quiet luxury, pale marble, soft fabrics, and an entire wall of glass opening onto the port. Floor-to-ceiling windows made the city look like a moving painting. Yachts swung gently in their berths, and sports cars glided along perfect streets like tamed beasts let out for a gentle walk. Diana slipped off her sunglasses and just stood there, taking it all in. A small, almost disbelieving smile curved her lips, the kind someone wears when a dream they had never dared to admit suddenly appears in front of them. Behind her, Dodi did not say anything. He simply went to her side and took her hand. They stood that way, fingers laced, looking out at the tiny kingdom of excess and promise glowing under the sun. The first hours were made of nothing but senses. The perfume of roses and lilies scattered around the suite. The chill of the white wine that arrived without them having to ask. The touch of cold marble under bare feet as they walked from room to room, testing reality with each step. Diana opened her suitcase slowly, as if unwrapping something sacred. She chose a white silk dress that seemed to catch the light of the room, running it through her fingers like a small ritual for the moment. She vanished into the bathroom, humming under her breath. Dodi loosened his tie, traded his blazer and shirt for a light linen one, and ran a hand through his hair, laughing quietly to himself. "What are we even doing here?" he muttered, half in disbelief, half in joy. When she stepped out, he turned, and everything went still. She stood framed by tall curtains that moved lazily in the breeze, the silk drifting around her legs, her hair soft around her shoulders. For a heartbeat, she did not look real. "Well?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. His mouth opened, then closed again. Nothing came out. "Ha ha ha," she laughed, the sound low and warm. "I'll take that as a compliment." "There are no words," he finally managed. "And you know how rare that is for me." There was no rush. No schedule worth more than that moment. Just the quiet certainty, hanging between them like a gentle weight, that life, for once, had slipped perfectly into place. Before dinner, they went out with no destination, letting the old streets pull them in like a tide. They wandered down narrow alleys where laundry hung between windows, where shutters were faded and beautiful, where tourists streamed past with maps and cameras. No one looked twice at them. Faces passed by, conversations buzzed in a dozen languages, and yet somehow they were wrapped in an invisible cloak of anonymity. For a woman who had spent so much of her life watched, the freedom of being unseen felt like sorcery. They paused before a tiny perfumery tucked into a stone corner. Inside, glass bottles of handmade fragrances filled the shelves, each labeled in delicate script. Diana leaned in to sniff one, then another, closing her eyes, the scents of fig, jasmine, bergamot, and sea salt swirling around her. This one smells like summer that never ends, she said. That one smells like trouble, Dodi answered. She turned her head, amused. Good trouble? The best kind, he grinned. She rolled her eyes, but her smile softened into a little awe that made his chest tighten. A few steps further on, a bakery sent out plumes of warm air that smelled of butter, honey, and toasted grains. Inside, loaves and pastries crowded the counter, their names written in chalk. They left with a still-hot baguette, carrying it between them and tearing off pieces as they walked. Not very glamorous, she mumbled through a mouthful of bread. He brushed a crumb from the corner of her mouth with his thumb. It's my favorite kind of glamour. Ha ha ha, she burst out, covering her face for a second before peeking at him through her fingers. Back in the suite, the sky was turning to gold, then rose. The harbor slowly filled with boats returning from the day, their wakes leaving brief, shining scars on the water. Diana perched on the wide windowsill, knees drawn up, chin resting them, watching the city light itself piece by piece. Dodi poured more wine and joined her, their shoulders touching. No grand speech felt necessary. They just sat, sharing the silence and the view. Outside, everything moved. Inside, time seemed to pause politely at the door. If anyone had asked when it had begun between them, neither would have named some dramatic declaration. It started there, in that quiet space, where their shared presence said more than promises ever could. The next morning, the sea lay still and glassy when the yacht slid away from the dock. It was a long, elegant thing, white as sea foam, slicing the water like an arrow let loose in slow motion. They boarded with almost nothing, just a straw hat, sunglasses, a worn camera, and a stubborn desire to escape the world for a few hours. The captain nodded, understanding without questions, and took them away from the harbor as Monaco blurred behind them. Diana slipped off her sandals and walked barefoot across the pale wooden deck. Each gentle up and down of the yacht felt like a song under her steps. The wind tugged at her dress, at her hair, and she closed her eyes a moment, letting the sun warm her eyelids. Dodi leaned against the railing, watching the shore shrink and her smile grow. The line of the coast and the curve of her lips seemed equally hypnotic, both soft, both dangerous, both impossible to look away from for long. The sea was not just scenery. It was a living thing, deep, impossibly blue, almost transparent at the edges. It reflected the sky with such fidelity that the boundary between above and below began to blur. They lay side by side on lounge chairs under a light canopy, wrapped in white towels. 2 flutes of champagne waited, cool and bright. To what? She asked, lifting her glass. To this version of us, he said. The one without alarms and phones and people knocking on the door. She snorted, then took a sip. Bubbles tickled her nose, and she pulled the glass away with a soft ha-ha-ha, laughing at herself. After a while, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you hear that? She whispered. The engines? He joked. No, she answered. Time. Stopping. He went still. The engines hummed, the waves slapped gently against the hull, a distant gull cried. For once, there were no ringing phones, no flashing cameras, no obligations. You're right, he said quietly. I can hear it too. They anchored near a hidden cove carved into the cliffs, unreachable from land. The rocks formed a semicircle around a strip of pale sand, protecting the small beach from prying eyes. A small inflatable brought them to shore. The water kissed their ankles, clear and cool. The sand was smooth, white, almost unreal beneath their feet. Diana waded into the shallows, then sat near the edge of the water, skirt hitched up, letting waves flick foam over her toes. She began to collect tiny shells and stones, holding each one up to the light as if it might contain a secret. A few steps back, Dodi didn't dare speak. He watched her frame, her hair tangled by the sea breeze, the sun picking out copper in her hair, the concentration on her face as she studied each shell. She turned and waved him closer, eyes bright. Look at this one, she said, holding up a perfect little spiral. It's like it's been writing letters to the ocean for centuries. He came near and knelt in the sand, trying to joke, but his voice caught. Something about her sitting there, half wet, half glowing, made an ache rise in him he hadn't expected. He knew, with sudden clarity, that this exact image would live in him forever, even when other memories faded. Back on the yacht, they dried in the sun. A tray of fresh strawberries and a bowl of melted white chocolate appeared, along with a bottle of chilled rose. Diana dipped a strawberry, held it above her mouth until a streak of chocolate threatened to fall, and then laughed as she caught it at the last second. "You're playing with your food," he teased. "I'm making art," she argued, then held one out to him. He leaned forward and bit, slow and exaggerated, making her dissolve into a warm ha-ha-ha that rang over the water. Between bites and sips, she began to talk. Not about schedules or plans, but about things buried deeper. She talked about wanting to live more slowly, about coffee that wasn't rushed, about mornings where she could stay in bed just because, about laughter that wasn't polite but real and ugly, and until her stomach hurt. She admitted she wanted to love openly, without always feeling she had to say sorry for needing too much, feeling too much. Her voice trembled at one point, and she blinked up at the sky so the tears would not fall. One rebellious drop escaped anyway, sliding down her cheek. She let out a shaky breath and muttered, half laughing at herself, "Look at me, almost weeping on a yacht." He reached over and wiped the tear away with the pad of his thumb, softly, reverently. "It's allowed," he said. "Happy or sad, your tears are safe with me." He listened to every word, storing them inside as if they were coordinates on a map leading to her truest self. Above them, the sky lay open like a promise. Between sea and sky, in that fragile space, something deeper settled quietly between them, not shouted, not formal, just there. At dusk, as they returned to port, the sun dipped toward the horizon and then slipped into the sea with a last flare of copper. Diana stood at the railing, both hands resting on the cool metal, eyes fixed on the melting line of light ahead. Dodi stepped behind her and slid his arms around her waist, pulling her gently back against his chest. The wind nipped at their faces, but warmth pooled where their bodies met. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. It was the kind of moment that time looks at and decides not to touch, made of gold light, darkening water, and a quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. If anyone had asked them then what happiness looked like, they would not have given an answer. They would simply have turned and pointed toward the sea. One early afternoon, Dodi appeared at the hotel entrance with a mischievous light in his eyes and one hand hidden behind his back. "What did you do?" Diana asked, immediately suspicious. "Do you trust me?" He replied, offering his free hand. "Horribly," she said, but slipped her fingers into his anyway. He led her down to the private garage, cool and echoing with the faint smell of fuel and rubber. Around a corner, something red and gleaming waited under the lights. A Porsche 911 convertible, bright as a fresh wound, sat there as if it had been drawn by someone who loved speed a little too much. Diana froze. "No," she breathed. "You didn't." He tossed her a key fob with a grin. "For today," he said. "We borrow a little freedom." She walked around the car slowly, fingertips hovering just above its polished curves. "It looks like a toy for the gods," she murmured. "You're much prettier than any god I've met," he replied. She shook her head, cheeks flushing. "Ah," she said under her breath. "Stop it." He opened the passenger door with theatrical ceremony. "Madam?" "Ha ha ha," she laughed, gathering her dress and slipping inside. The engine roared to life with a deep, confident growl that vibrated in her spine. They pulled out into the sunshine, the roof down, the sky suddenly twice as big. Monaco's streets fell away quickly as they climbed into the hills, the road tightening into curves that hugged the cliffs. The sea flashed on one side, bright and endless, on the other, the rock rose steep and rugged. With every tight turn, Diana laughed louder, a mix of delight and adrenaline. "You're enjoying this too much," she shouted over the wind. "Is that a crime?" He shouted back. "If it is, I'm an accomplice," she answered, breaking into a breathless ha-ha-ha as the car hugged another bend. It wasn't just speed. It was trust, her trust in his hands on the wheel, his trust in her unguarded joy. For once, they were not anyone to the outside world. No titles, no cameras, no expectations. Just two people and a red streak of freedom on an empty road. High above the coast, he pulled off onto a hidden lookout framed by wildflowers and pines. They got out slowly, as if waking from a spell. The view took the rest of the air from their lungs. The sea stretched out in a vast sheet of deep blue, dotted with tiny white sails. The sun had started its descent, casting everything in a soft, forgiving light. Diana walked to the cliff's edge and closed her eyes as the wind wrapped itself around her like a shawl. When she opened them, there was a warmth in her smile that made him catch his breath. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her carefully, locking his hands over her heart. For a while they said nothing, listening only to the distant crash of waves and the quick beat of their own hearts. On the way back, she insisted on driving. "Have you done this before?" he asked, eyeing the serpentine road. "You'll find out," she said, sliding behind the wheel with a grin. He buckled his seatbelt with exaggerated caution, making her giggle. "If we survive," he started. "Ha ha ha, hush," she interrupted, starting the engine. She drove with a light, confident touch that surprised him, taking the corners smoothly, the gears changing in perfect rhythm. They shouted jokes into the wind, laughed until tears blurred the road for her, and for those few kilometers they were not adults with histories and scars, they were teenagers on the run, drunk on nothing but the present. By the time they rolled back into the city, night had folded itself over the sky. The harbor lights glittered like a handful of jewels scattered over black silk. The car's engine ticked as it cooled, the residual heat ghosting into the air. They sat in the parked car for a moment, breathing hard, their hands still intertwined on the console. "What we did," she said quietly, "it didn't feel like driving. It felt like flying." He squeezed her fingers. "Then I hope we never land," he replied. The sun was barely up the next day when they were quietly escorted through side gates and guarded corridors into the backstage heart of one of the most famous circuits in the world. Monaco on race weekend was something else entirely, louder, brighter, sharper. The stands buzzed, a living wave of color and anticipation. Mechanics darted around the pit lane like choreographed dancers, tools in hand, headsets on. The smell of high-octane fuel, burned rubber and, strangely, roses from the hospitality suites all mixed into a dizzying perfume. Diana, in simple yet elegant clothes that still somehow turned heads, stared as cars roared past just meters away. Red, silver, yellow, streaks of color and machinery that seemed to bend time as they shot down the straight. The sound was not just loud, it was physical. The roar of the engines climbed into her chest and set up camp there. "Can you feel that?" she shouted. Dodi grinned. "That," he yelled back, "is happiness powered by gasoline." He began to explain everything, pit strategies, tire compounds, why some cars bounced more than others. His hands moved as he talked, eyes shining. But every few minutes, his attention drifted from the track to her, watching how she laughed when the ground vibrated, how she flinched then smiled when the engine screamed by. During a technical pause, they were led into the paddock. Drivers walked past with helmets in hand, their faces set. Team members pushed carts of tires, laptops glowed, radios crackled with coded messages. One of the teams he loved most let them close to a car. Diana stood beside it, fingers hovering near the painted surface but not quite daring to touch. "Stay like that," Dodi said suddenly. "I want to keep this." He pulled an old Polaroid camera from his blazer pocket, making her blink in surprise. "You still use that dinosaur?" she teased. "Something more real than pixels," he answered, winking. The camera clicked and whirred, spitting out a blank square that slowly bloomed into an image. Diana, the car, the chaos of the paddock blurred behind her. She looked at the photo as it developed, and a soft awe escaped before she could hide it. Back in their glass-fronted box above the main straight, the atmosphere tightened as the cars lined up for the start. The crowd's noise rose to a low, humming roar. The red lights on the starting gantry lit up one by one. Diana's hands gripped the railing, her eyes locked on the grid. Her heart pounded in time with the revving engines. Beside her, Dodi watched her instead of the cars, memorizing the way the light caught her cheekbones, the intensity in her gaze. The red lights went dark. The engines exploded into pure, savage sound. As the cars launched forward, Dodi leaned in and kissed her. It was brief, clumsy with adrenaline, but full of everything neither of them had dared to say: longing, trust, fear, tenderness. For a second the chaos outside fell away, replaced by the thunder of their own pulses. She pulled back slowly, eyes wide, breathing hard, a stunned smile curving across her face. "You pick your moments," she murmured. "I like a little drama," he replied, and they both broke into breathless ha-ha-ha that the engines could not drown out. The race went on. The sun climbed higher. Cars passed, pitted, overtook. But something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer just two people watching a spectacle. They were their own small engine at the center of it. When the checkered flag finally waved and the crowd erupted, Diana turned to him and confessed she had completely lost track of who had won. "I think it was us," he said. She laughed again, softer this time. And hand in hand, they slipped away from the noise as if they had just run their own private race and crossed the finish line together. That night, the Monte Carlo casino gleamed under the moon, its facade lit like a stage set for a story that had been going on for more than a century. Gardens whispered in the darkness, and luxury cars lined up outside like actors waiting for their cue. Diana stepped out of their car in a black satin dress that caught every stray bit of light. The neckline was modest but elegant, the fabric floating when she moved. She looked timeless, as if she had stepped out of an old film. Dodi, in a classic tuxedo, waited for her at the bottom of the steps. His eyes, unable to hide anything, shone with such open pride that she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" he asked. "Like I'm the only thing here," she whispered. He smiled. "That's exactly how I'm looking at you." She murmured a little awe, almost annoyed at herself, and tucked her arm through his. Inside, the casino was all gold and deep red. Chandeliers glittered overhead like captive constellations. The quiet notes of a piano floated through the air, wrapping around the soft clink of glasses and the rustle of cards. They walked between tables, nodding politely when they recognized a face, but never letting go of each other's hands. At a small roulette table near the window, Dodi pulled out a seat for her. "Just for fun," he said. "No pressure. No strategy." She placed a few chips on a number that meant something only to her. Birthdays, coincidences, tiny secrets that made her smile. Sometimes she won. More often she didn't. Each spin made them laugh anyway. "You're always lucky," he teased. She rolled her eyes. "Have you not read my biography?" She answered. "I'm not talking about chips," he said quietly. "I'm talking about the way you make everything else glow." Her gaze softened. "You can't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because then I'm going to stand here in the middle of a casino weeping like a fool," she said with a shaky little laugh. He reached out and squeezed her fingers. "And I'd still think you were the most beautiful thing in the room." The champagne went to their heads slowly. Between bets, between quiet jokes and shared glances, the world around them blurred. The true luxury of the night revealed itself, not the money, not the marble, but the astonishing feeling of being completely present with another soul. After a while, they drifted toward the central bar. The pianist had moved into a slow, tender version of La Vie en Rose, each note falling into the room like a promise. Dodi ordered 2 more glasses of champagne and handed one to her. "To what?" she asked, lifting her glass. "To tonight," he said. "To now. To having no answers and needing none." They touched rims. The small, fragile clink seemed, for a heartbeat, to contain the whole universe. When they stepped back outside, it was past midnight. The grand staircase was nearly empty, lit by the warm glow of old street lamps. The sea in the distance lay dark and still, reflecting a few scattered lights. At the top of the stairs, Diana paused. She looked out at the quiet city, the sleeping bay, the hint of first stars overhead. "This city hides secrets inside its stones," she murmured. He slipped an arm around her waist. "I like that one of them is us," he said. She leaned against him. "Ah," she whispered, closing her eyes for a brief, precious second. They descended slowly, hand in hand, their steps in perfect sync. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they knew that this night, short as it was, had already carved itself into something permanent. On their last evening, as the sky began to turn the color of embers and ripe peaches, they drove along the coastal road again, this time in uneasy silence, not because something was wrong, but because everything suddenly felt too big for words. The red Porsche moved smoothly between the curves, until Dodi turned off onto a narrower road that climbed toward a lonely lighthouse perched on the edge of a cliff. The lighthouse was old, its stone withered by decades of storms and sunsets. It stood alone, a patient guardian at the edge of land, watching the moods of the Mediterranean. They parked and climbed the steps up to the base of the tower. Their hands were clasped, their eyes meeting in quiet, unspoken questions and answers. At the top of the path, a weathered wooden bench waited, facing the boundless horizon. The sea below looked like molten metal, reflecting a sunset so intense it bordered on unreal. They sat down side by side. The breeze touched their faces, carrying the smell of salt and wild herbs. The only sound was the deep, steady breath of the waves hitting the rocks far below. "Do you ever think," Diana asked softly, "that there are places where time really bends? Or stops?" He turned his head and kissed her hair. "If anywhere," he said, "it's here. Right now." They spoke of the future then, with the calm of people who had learned to stop begging time to slow and instead had begun to savor it. They talked about trips they still wanted to take, about quiet dinners with no dress code, about jokes that would probably never be funny to anyone but them. They even spoke of getting old, of wrinkles and slower steps and bad backs, as if it were a safe, gentle thing. As if age were not something to fear, but a promise that they would still be here, annoying each other and making each other laugh. As the last slice of sun sank below the line of the sea, the lighthouse lantern flickered, then ignited, sending a soft, sweeping light across the darkening water. Diana watched it for a long moment. Then she looked back at him, eyes shining too brightly in the dusky light. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything," he said immediately. "When we're far from here," she said, voice trembling just a little, "when everything is noisy and fast and heavy again, promise me you'll remember this light." He cupped her face gently in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I promise," he replied, his voice low and steady. "Every time I close my eyes, I'll see it. And every time I open them and find you there, I'll know it's real." A small, broken awe slipped from her lips as a tear finally broke free. She laughed softly at herself, half embarrassed by the weeping, and he just held her closer, as if he could anchor the moment in place. Above them, the first star appeared. Beneath that pale point of light, they kissed, not with urgency, but with the quiet depth of people sealing something they knew would outlast distance and noise and fear. Eventually, they walked back down from the lighthouse, slow, reluctant, as if afraid that moving too fast would wake them from the dream. The sky had turned to deep velvet blue, the distant city beginning to sprinkle its lights one by one. In the car, they did not turn on the radio. They drove in a silence that felt full, warm, and complete, packed with all the things they had said and all the things they no longer needed to. In the rearview mirror, the lighthouse beam kept sweeping the night, blinking at them like a gentle eye that refused to stop watching over them. They left the cliff behind, but they carried something invisible with them, a promise stitched into laughter and quiet tears, into every shared ha-ha-ha and whispered ah, into every stolen second when time itself had paused, just long enough to let them fall in love.